No good friend comes into some friend's house and beats them on their own table.
She told me she threw the game, and took one for the team so that she didn't jeopardize my scholarship or anything like
Oh,
that. You guys said you recruited me, but I'm like, nah, I don't think this would have happened if mine didn't get homesick in Westerfield, Ohio.
need a little more pep. And you withheld information from me that you were pledging. You said, well, I didn't want to tell you. I didn't know how you'd feel about it. How many people in the NFL have beat Brady and Manning?
Nobody.
Hey, teammates, we're lucky today to have with us on another episode of It's All About the Team, one of the great teammates I've ever seen in 38 years of coaching, and his name is Malcolm Jenkins.
Coach, man, I'm glad to be here. It's funny, we want to talk about team, and you're the one who taught me everything there is to know about team and my role in it. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Well, I'll tell you what, you knew about team way before you got to Ohio State, and so I'm going to tell the viewers and listeners my Malcolm Jenkins story. Now, they can all read about it in your book, which is a great book. Yeah. What they don't tell you about winning, and Malcolm's all about winning, and he's not about winning just in football. He's got Super Bowl championships and Big Ten championships and all that, but he's about winning in life and making a difference in people's lives. But here's my recollection, and disclaimer: I'm getting old, Malk. I'm like almost 72 here.
You still got it. You still got
it. And so maybe my recollections aren't as good as they should be, but my recollection about your beginnings of understanding what team means began at home, because your mom and dad were special. And I'm going to give one quick story, and then I'm going to let you talk about what you learned about team from mom and dad. So when you visited on your recruiting visit, you went out with the guys, and we had the parents over to the house, and so we were playing pool, and your mom kept beating everybody. And she beat, I don't know, Coach Fickle. She beat Coach Haycock. She beat Coach Bowman. She beat everybody. Coach Hazel. She dusted them all. Well, then she said, if I'm going to be the champion, I got to play the owner of the table. And my son had built the pool table in wood shop, and I was so proud of that table. And he was a great craftsman. And so she kind of called me out, So she went and she just boom, 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 boom. Had it all the way down to the 8-ball, and then she purposefully scratched on the 8-ball so I would win. Well, I hadn't made a ball. And I looked at her and she said, hey, no good friend comes into some friend's house and beats them on their own table. And that told me all I needed to know about your family and what it's all about. But you talk to our viewers, because so many of our guests, the beginnings of learning about team started at home. Yeah. And those that weren't blessed with a situation that was team-like at home might have had to learn it later, but you learned it at home. So talk a little bit about Lee and Gwendolyn.
Yeah, no, I think even that story is probably a great example of teamwork, because what she told me about that story wasn't that it was about sportsmanship and being, a good guest in somebody's home. She told me she threw the game, and took one for the team so that she didn't jeopardize my scholarship or anything like
that. Right.
So I understood what it meant for different people to play different roles, from my parents. But I think, both of them taught me, I think, great things when it came to community and family and what that means. And when you establish those things, it usually affects how you show up in the world. And so my dad was one who taught me all the time about ownership of your community. It's not just about your home. You're responsible to clean up, what's 2 doors down this way, 2 doors down that way. You're responsible for your neighbor. And so when I started to develop into a young man and started to look at all of the things I was getting into, starting a foundation and feeling an urge to make the areas around me that I call home better, I can directly look at my dad as an example. But I think one of the things around football players especially is we don't talk a lot about or enough about the role that I think women play in our lives,
Mm.
especially in football. Like my mom, and I talk about it in my book all the time. My grandmother, just their influence and the lessons that they taught me that allowed me to really stand up as an independent man. You know, to be able to leave Jersey, where I was growing up, and go into a foreign place in Ohio. And I remember my mom, you know, me wanting her to take me to the admissions office when we first got on campus, and she's like, "No, you got to do it on your own." And I had so many lessons like that that I talk about in my book. And so to even see nowadays, like I'm watching these videos online. There's this mom down in Florida. She's teaching her son offensive line drills. She's still got her work clothes on. You know, that
Yeah.
stuff is inspiring. Those are the things that I think, you know, eventually turn you into, you know, a man who understands, you know, hard work, integrity, discipline. Those things start at home. They definitely started at home for me.
Well, it's interesting you bring up mom because many times I get a chance to go and speak to companies about building team or leadership or all those things, and I often tell the truth that the greatest leader in my life was my mother,
Hmm.
and she never had a title, she never had a paycheck. All she did was wake up every day and serve people, whether it was us as a family or the community. She sewed the names on the backs of the jerseys of every one of my dad's players,
Mm.
hand sewn them. I mean, that's just the way she was.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't understand that leadership isn't some rank you have or some place you have in high society. Leadership is about serving others and
Yeah.
having your head on a swivel and trying to make a difference. And I know it was that way in your family. Obviously, I read the book, but I lived the book too, parts of the book. And
Hmm.
what I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had an aunt or something that was in Columbus
Yeah.
when you came to our youth camp.
Yeah. So you know, my aunt, my mom's sister, moved to Westerville, Ohio, and she was getting lonely. She was from Jersey. She was homesick. So my parents decided, okay, let's go pay my aunt a visit. And while we're out there for a couple weeks, they have this camp over at Ohio State. We'll have the boys go sign up. And this is why I tell everybody I fell into Ohio State's lap. You
Hmm.
guys said you recruited me, but I'm like, nah. I don't think this would have happened if mine didn't get homesick in Westerville, Ohio.
There's no
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
No,
But made
there's
it to the
no.
camp, and then yeah, the rest is history. That's when I met you and the rest of the staff, and ended up with a scholarship that day.
That is the truth. That we didn't really know who you were, um, but the way you presented yourself, the way you competed, just your humility, and then we asked you how you got there, and you said, "Well, I'm just staying at my aunt's house in Westerville," and one thing led to another, and the more we got to know you, obviously we went to work with Coach Higgins a little bit to
Yeah,
learn more about you, and one of the best stories I liked about we had offered you and all that stuff, but you always want to learn more about people. And so one of the best stories I remember from your high school days wasn't a football one. Uh, it was that you won. Didn't you win the 400 meter?
yeah.
Yeah. And to me, anybody that can win the 400 meter, that's no joke, you know. And I think was Butch Reynolds with us at the time.
Which one was yeah the speed
Yeah.
coach? Yep,
Yeah, right. And Butch was the what a world champion at the
exactly.
400, and he said, "Hey, if this guy can run whatever it was 47-1 or I can't remember what you ran,
Something
but
like that.
uh,
Yeah.
yep, it was special." Talk to us a little bit about uh, how Coach Higgins and the group around the high school built the culture of team.
Yeah, you know, Higgins was a really good motivator because we're a public school, you know, so we weren't recruiting, you know, guys. We're just he just gets the whatever cards he's dealt from a
Mm-hmm.
player standpoint. But what he did a really good job was keeping us focused and understanding the big picture. So we came into a culture where winning, practicing hard, and understanding that players, you know, were the leadership of the team, that it started with the senior class and then went
Mm-hmm.
down. And so for me, my freshman class, I remember we were just so tight that by the time that we got into an opportunity as sophomores to contribute to the varsity team, we had already sharpened ourselves so much that then I think Higgins does a great job of putting people, select people in charge. So you learn to be a follower at first, you earn
Mm-hmm.
your stripes, and then you
Mm-hmm.
kind of excel from there. You advance from there. So by the time we got to being seniors, we were so focused and locked in, and guys had sacrificed so much that we made sure that everything was above the team. Even me getting recruited, I had already committed to Ohio State because I didn't want to be a distraction to the rest of my
Right.
teammates and wanted them
Right.
to get their opportunity to get recruited. And that philosophy really started with, I think, Dan Higgins, and we had a lot of success when I was playing. We won 3 state championships
I
in a
know.
row.
Yeah.
Yeah, while I was in high school.
So now, was that the largest division
Yeah, we were in
in New
Group
Jersey?
Four. Yeah, Central
Wow.
Jersey. Then we moved to North Jersey and still had success. We ended up, again, out of a public school with 3 first round draft picks that came off of that high school team. Myself,
Wow.
Kyle Wilson went to Boise State, and then Anthony Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Big lineman.
yeah,
Yep.
big lineman. Yep, first round
Yep.
pick went to San Fran, and
Yep.
all of us literally all on the same team, and really trained and developed under Dan Higgins.
Well, it's funny. I went to Little Baldwin Wallace College here in Ohio, and we had Jersey kids, and they were tough,
Yeah,
and they all played. Well, then every place I coached at Syracuse. Now we had a lot of Jersey kids, tough.
hmm
I coached at Miami of Ohio. We had a couple Jersey kids at Ohio State. Anyone that came from Jersey, whether it was Jack Tatum,
yeah,
or you, I mean, it lots of first round draft choices. What makes Jersey so tough uh, uh, in football? And they were all good team guys, by the way.
yeah. I think, for me, I think there's always been a bit of an underdog mentality that comes with people from Jersey. We're in the shadows in New York, Philadelphia, DC, and we always kind of get the short end of the stick. So there's always a natural chip on our shoulders. I think
Mm-hmm.
we're a blue collar state, so we understand the discipline and that comes with hard work. We don't mind doing the dirty work. But I think, and I talk about it in my book, just, and this happens everywhere, but it's just the willingness to get in a fight is
Mm-hmm.
is almost a
Yeah.
prerequisite, right? To fight for the things
Right.
that you believe in, whether it's defending
Yep.
yourself, defending your family, or even your neighborhood and your
Yep.
community is really instilled in us. And those things translate well into football, right? The ability
Mm-hmm.
to fight against adversity, to do the hard things, even when nobody's watching, to be part of a team and have the humility to not get the credit. Those are things that I think are almost stamped on anybody who's grown up and been brought up and cut their teeth in New Jersey. And I think for me, the next part of that was how to like build on that. So coming to Ohio State, I knew I was tough. I could stand up and develop, and be known for that fight and grit. But I'll never forget my second year going into training camp. We're getting ready to do the Oklahoma drill, the tackling drill, and every year we watch guys, the offense and defense erupt into fights. It's pushing and shoving, it's that's part of the whole
Right.
deal.
Right.
And I'll never forget a fight breaking out, and I'm in the middle of it, and you pulling me out of the 100 guys that are out here. You only pulled me out, and I'm like, what's the problem? And you said, well, they follow you. They follow you. And it was like the first time that I thought it's not just enough, right, to just be the tough guy. That when
Mm-hmm.
you're a leader, you're a part of the team. Some people are playing 2 games at the same time. There's a game within the game that as a leader you must always be aware of. And that was really the first time that I even got exposed to that kind of thinking. And it's something that I'm still, building upon. That there's definitely, there's a place for that toughness. That's the foundation, but there is discernment that's necessary of
Mm-hmm.
when to use that, when not to use it, when to use a little bit more grace, or face things on directly. Uh, yeah, and I learned
Yeah.
that at Ohio State.
Well, it's interesting. As you talking, I'm thinking of two similar guys. I looked at you and Dante
Mm-hmm.
Whitner very similarly. Tough leaders without having to say much,
Yeah,
but you knew everyone was watching. You probably were a little more vocal than Dante,
yeah,
but not much. Uh, but they knew that you did the right things, they knew you were tough. They knew you were working extra, you know, uh, and it's amazing. Uh, you talk about how do you build a team? Well, you better have some of those people on your team
Hmm.
that can show you how to be a
Yeah.
teammate.
Yep.
Because if you don't, if the ringleaders, you know, uh, don't embody, care and concern for everybody, if they don't uh, respect what you need to do to become good, if they don't back it up with their performance, all those things. And I looked at you and Dante very similarly. But I do remember one story, and you mentioned it in your book about when you were pledging
Oh
uh,
yeah.
that one spring. And I
Yeah.
remember asking you a couple of times that, Malk, man, come on, man, we need a little more pep in your step because you were going into what, your junior year,
Yeah.
I think?
Yep. I was going into my
Yeah,
junior season.
right. So you're going, we really needed you. Uh,
Yep.
and I thought, man, we need a little more pep. And you withheld information from me that you were pledging till till
Yeah.
finally I had when we sat down together, I said, I think you're pledging. And you said, well, I didn't want to tell you. I didn't know how you'd feel about it, which, you know what? One thing about building a team is we all have to be willing to tell each other how we feel and what we're doing. And,
Hmm.
sometimes it might not, you might think that it doesn't appeal to someone. Then you might find out, like you did with me, I was in a fraternity. I got it.
Yep.
I mean, these are my closest friends to this day. I mean, the lessons I learned in my fraternity were probably every bit as impactful in my life as the lessons I learned in the classroom or football or church or anywhere else, because there
Yeah.
was that
I remember
something.
that. I remember that
And
conversation, and it really forced me to think about, even as a leader, like, what does it look like to truly be accountable to, like, and to have trust. I think that's really at the core
yep,
of all of it, right? Do I trust that even if something's not working out the way I wanted to, or this might not be something that you're aligned with, can I bring it to you? And is there space for
right,
me to bring it to you? And I think,
yep,
what you did as a coach at that time, when I wasn't as trusted, you still created a space. And not only did it build, I think, our bond, but it gave me an opportunity to learn too. Because as you said, you were like, hey, I learned more from my fraternity than I did in any class. Right.
right, right,
And it made me change the way that I looked at it. Like, how much am I learning, from this experience that I'm having? And instead of hoarding it, how am I able to maybe use that, to enlighten some of my teammates, or talk about it with other folks? And then the very next year, Deontay Johnson joins the fraternity as well. uh,
hmm
and it snowballed. So I definitely
yep,
appreciated that grace in that moment, because I think what outed me was that I had to miss a team function, and I saw I
yeah,
missed one
that's
team
right,
function
that's
for
right.
something else. Yeah, and wasn't able to. You didn't say anything, and yeah, learned a lesson.
But it's interesting. It's one of the lessons I learned at that time too. Uh, and I think it might have even been the next year where we started talking about that acronym WAYT. What are you thinking? Because it helped me understand that we needed to do a better job as coaches to understand what our guys were thinking about, what was important to them,
Mm-hmm.
what were they feeling. Um, you know, I think it was shortly after we didn't play well in the national championship game in '06, and I thought,
Yeah.
I didn't do a very good job of finding out that maybe some of us weren't as glued in as we could have been, and two, addressing it. And I came to the conclusion that two things happen when you find out what someone's thinking or what's important to them: is you can learn a little bit and you can come up with a good idea, like, oh shoot, I never experienced that, I never looked at it that way, you know
Mm-hmm.
or you could help clarify some thinking when a guy says, well, I don't want to take this class. And so, well, you have to if you want to be an accountant, so you can, if you figure out what they're thinking and what's going through their minds. And that was one of the number of things, the conversation with you. I thought, man, I wonder if I'm not letting these guys know that I think being in a fraternity would be great. And I wonder if they're thinking that I don't want them to do that, that type of thing. It was a learning time for me. But let's go back to your
Yeah. No,
freshman year.
oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Give us your thought, and then I'll go backwards.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes as leaders, that's what we make that mistake with assuming,
Right.
that we know how people think, and oftentimes, all it takes is us just asking the question or presenting the space for people to give us their perspectives or share. Um, and I think, yeah, that was definitely something I try to do a little bit more often as well. Is just to remember and not to assume that these things, exist, that they know that I'm supportive of whatever decisions they make. It's like those things sometimes need to be explicitly communicated to build that proactivity from a leadership standpoint.
Well, and we can't collectively be a good group together, and especially the larger the
Right.
group gets, whether it's from a team,
Yeah.
then it's to a community, then it's to a nation, it's to a world,
Yeah.
whatever, unless we are hearing what's important to the other,
Hmm.
and what's going through their mind and what's their vantage point. But anyway, let me back up to freshman year. So you came in, um, and as you think about that was '05, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you have 1 year with Dante or no?
Yeah. I had 1 year with Dante. He was
Okay.
a
So,
junior. Yep.
and then he went out early. Yep. Okay. So if you think back to that team, um, and you had to label one word, I like these exercises. You had to label one word that is the first word that comes into your mind about that team. What would you say? I
That
know you've had a
team.
lot of teams.
Yeah. No, that team was. I thought battle tested. We lost to
Mm-hmm.
Texas that year in a
Mm-hmm.
heartbreaker, and early
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
before it's like that was back when you lose one game, and that was,
Mm-hmm.
your hopes for a national championship were
Right.
out of it. And that was week 2. And so I had to
Mm-hmm.
watch a team of leaders go through an entire season where they still needed to be competitive, still wanted to get, win the Big Ten, still wanted to get into a decent bowl game, um, with the thoughts that you're probably not making it to a national championship.
Right.
And those are times where I think you learn a lot about leaders and how you keep things together when
Mm-hmm.
hopes and dreams sometimes get shattered. And so
Yep.
that set the foundation for the next 2 teams that I
Mm-hmm.
was a
Yeah.
part of, that
Right.
ended up going to the title 2 times in a row.
Right. Yep.
But it was built off of, I think, the character of that team that I witnessed with, AJ Hawk and Schlegel and Dante and all of these guys, Nate
Yeah.
Sally
Yeah.
on defense, even Troy at the helm. I
Mm-hmm.
saw us go through the ups and downs of that season, and we were battle tested.
And really, it's kind of funny. By the end of that year, we may have been as good a team as we have in my 10 teams.
Yep.
That might have at the end.
Yep.
Now all the games count, but at the end, that one was probably as good as there was.
Yeah.
And so one word that would pop in your mind about the '06 team. So you're now a sophomore.
Yeah. The '06 team, that was in when we lost to Florida.
Yep.
Um, that team, um, oh, what would the word be for like a team that did not have a contingency?
Mm.
we
Mm-hmm.
we were talented. I would say that, and I would
Mm-hmm.
emphasize talented because I think we were good enough to beat everybody. And then we
Mm-hmm.
saw in a game where the talent was either equal or we lost talent at a very small area, that all of a sudden that balance was way off, and then we get embarrassed on a national
Mm-hmm.
stage, and it wasn't just embarrassed like you made mistakes that kept you out of the game. It's like I actually felt
Mm-hmm.
unmatched in a game.
Yeah.
Like if we
Yeah.
played this 9 times out of 10, we're probably getting the same result. Um, and that was I remember leaving that season thinking that there are levels to what I believe that greatness is. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
thought we were great because we were talented, but it's almost like you've got to be ready to compete against the unnamed opponent. It's not the team in
Right.
your division, it's not the player in your team.
Yeah.
It is this person you can't see, but they will be better than anything you can imagine when you get there. Yeah.
You know what? The only thing I might beg to differ is if we played it 10 times, if we were of sound mind,
Yeah.
I think we would win 5. I'm not saying, we would dominate because they're very good and
Yeah.
take nothing away from them. And that's probably I probably have a handful of games in my 25 years as a head coach that I look back and I say, I did not have these guys mentally ready.
Yeah. If you
And
not to blame anything, but I think the injury to Ted Ginn was a huge one. That I when I say 9 times out of 10, I'm keeping that part of the game. The
okay.
inability to like lose a guy like that and still compete, I think was where our Achilles heel was. If we don't jump on Ted's back in the celebration, then all of a sudden that game is
Right.
is I think
Right.
way more competitive. But I think it was like sitting on the team is the inability to adjust to that. Like even if it
Mm-hmm.
was Troy, going down or
Mm-hmm.
just somebody
Mm-hmm.
important, I could see the same us running
Mm-hmm.
into that same roadblock because we hadn't. I don't remember a time in the season where we had to fall on, where we had gone through a situation where we had to truly rely on, a backup or being down a team. We were pretty good until we got to
Yeah.
the team up north, and we knew that was going to be all hands on deck. That was kind of
Right.
our test. But I felt like I wish that team had a little bit more adversity.
Right. Well, our O2 team, you weren't there yet, but
Yeah.
shoot, we should have lost 3 or 4 games.
Right.
But we kept fighting, and that adversity made us stronger, and we became closer.
Hmm.
But I guess I would think back to that game, and I'd say because I don't think we were thinking right going in, even if we would have had Ted, I was just so down on what I felt that I just didn't think we had that passion, that we had that focus that we had.
Hmm.
But if we would, I would say we were as good as that team. But nevertheless, let's go on to '07. See, I have nightmares about that game, and now I'm
Yeah.
bringing them up again. But
Me
let's go
too.
to
Oh man.
right. Let's go to '07.
Yeah.
Think about your junior,
Mhm.
and what was that team about?
That team was now, my class really taking over. It's
Mm-hmm.
myself, James Laurinaitis is now at the helm. Um, Brian Robisky, Hartline, all of us are really
Mm-hmm.
um, the leaders of that team. And in that team, we did face the adversity. We were playing well. We weren't as talented as the year before, but we were still
Right.
dominated. And we lose a heartbreaker to Illinois
Yep.
where Rashawn Mendenhall just goes crazy. That was his welcome, his launch party into his career as an NFL running back.
Right.
And I remember us feeling like now a late loss, like everything is definitely over with from a national title perspective. And we're sitting there at 5 or 6, and then we watch one Saturday afternoon where all of the
Right.
championship games, happening. Everybody in front of us gets upset. That game, it felt like, we were really lucky to be in a national title. We probably weren't the best team in the country,
Mm-hmm.
but we were
Right.
not afraid of anybody, and we were a competitive
Yep.
bunch. And I think that was kind
Yep.
of our calling card there
Yep.
was we don't care who it is, we're going to show up and compete. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and
And we were
that was
mentally
what we
ready
did
for
all
that
the way
championship.
to the end of it. Different than the year before. Didn't
Ready
get the
for that
result we
championship.
wanted, but still,
Right.
I left the field feeling good about the way that we fought as a team.
Yep. Yep. No question. No question. And so you ended up staying 4 years. Did you end
Yep,
up
four
staying all
years.
4? Yeah, I thought so. So
Yeah,
what
all
was that
four.
decision like? Was it about the team? It was about because we'd lost 2 straight title games, or what made you decide to stay?
Yeah, it was two things. On a personal note, I wasn't ready to, and I knew this at my core. I was not ready to make football a profession. Like I still just loved the game. You know, if nobody paid me, I would still show up and play it like in the street. And I didn't want, and I knew
Mhm.
I wasn't ready for the professional aspect of making this a job. And I wanted to hold on to that. And then the second part was literally after that '07 national title game. I remember being in the showers. It's myself, Brian Hartline, Robisky, it's James Laurinaitis, and Boone is in there, I believe, and we're asking each other like, we all have a decision to make. The NFL is knocking. We know we can all probably leave if we wanted to, and all of us kind of had a feeling of just this taste in our mouth that things were just unfinished, and that with this group we
Mhm.
had an opportunity. We had been carving this out since our freshman year, really just waiting for our opportunity to take over a team. And so, I
Right.
know for me, it was in that locker room. I decided I would come back for my senior year, give it another try. One, I was having too much fun, wasn't ready to let it go.
Mhm.
But I felt like we had worked so hard and gotten so close, that we should give it another try.
So, what's the word that
Obviously, we
you think
didn't,
about
but didn't get the results we
with your
wanted.
'08 team? Well, you
Yeah,
weren't a bad team though. It
that
was a
one
good
that was
team.
the same. I found myself, yeah, no, the '08 team. I found myself really pulling off of what I saw from the seniors or from that group my freshman year, where we
Mhm.
lost that game to SC early in the season, and it's similar to how we lost to Texas. And you're faced with now early on, like even months away from making a decision to come back for a senior year with the hopes of a national title is ripped from you in week 2. And now
Mhm.
you've got to really decide what your legacy is going to be at. Be like, this is your last opportunity to play in the shoe. It's your last opportunity to represent this team. It's your last opportunity to be amongst these guys. How do you approach every day with gratitude? And I thought that made for a more meaningful experience, for me as a
Mhm.
senior. It made for one where no matter the circumstances, all the games were meaningful and fun. Um, and you kind of wish you would have taken that approach, in the beginning when the stakes are the
Mhm.
highest. But
Right.
really, I felt like that year for me, it being my last go round and knowing it was really a year filled with gratitude.
Hey teammates, I want to tell you about a project we're working on with Youngstown State University. One of the ways Ellen and I have decided to give back is through the Trestle Institute for Leadership and Teamwork. We've collected a set of successful business and nonprofit leaders to serve as guest servant leaders in partnership with the Sokolov Honors College to teach university students teamwork, leadership, and personal skills. We teach from a foundation built on gratitude, excellence, hope, love, and selflessness. If you're a young person or parent helping to search for a unique college experience, you can learn more at trestleinstitute.ysu.edu or ysu.edu. Links will be provided in the show notes. It's going to be interesting. The guys in college now don't have to face that,
Yeah,
because you can come back and win your conference or,
yeah,
there's what, 12 teams in the playoffs now, and
yep,
pretty soon it'll be 16.
yeah,
And I've told a lot of people, because I came from 1AA, and that's all we worried about was being good enough in November
hmm,
to get in the hunt, and just kind of like in the NFL, as long as I can get a chance.
yeah,
Um, and so it's going to be an interesting change for them. They won't have that feeling of do or die from the beginning of the year,
right,
and but what was that transition as you went to the NFL? Collegiality, kind of living with the guys
yeah.
and so forth, and now you're in the NFL. How and I spent 6 months in the NFL as a consultant, but I don't really know the business.
Mhm.
How do you go about building team? Because you were on some great teams.
Yeah. I think the number one thing is accountability. That's the biggest adjustment to me. Just, I remember, you got 12-year veterans, it's got a family with 3 kids at home, and they're not just like newborns, it's got middle school kids, high school
Mm-hmm.
kids. And I'm a 21-year-old rookie on in week 12, and my body's tired because I'm not used to how long
Mm-hmm.
the season is. And
Right.
he's like, I don't care if you're having a bad day. I need you to be accountable to your your job.
Right.
and
Right.
understanding that, right? Like it's not about even being prepared for the game. The coaches are there to help you, put you in the best position as possible, give you the information. But at the end of the day, you're accountable for if you know this information enough to perform. Um, and the recognition of that accountability, I think, is hard sometimes for guys to transition with. We've been used to being given the playbook, being told what to do. That on the next level, you're required to do these things on yourself, and that requires discipline, time management. It's not really even about your athletic ability and can you play the game of football. It's can you manage yourself and be accountable to the team to show up on time, to show up in shape, to show up and be prepared. Those are all things that you got to look in the mirror and understand. And that becomes, habits that you've built for a long time. You don't just turn that on and off. And I think, you see it from different programs that the New Orleans Saints love to draft guys from Ohio State because they know those type of things, that accountability is already baked into a program,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not like that everywhere. And that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing I've always been appreciated or have appreciated is that when I've come into rooms with the stamp of Ohio State and being under Jim Tressel, it's already come with the understanding that I know these things, and and that has become a reputation of people behind it. So,
So was it Coach Payton you played for?
yep, Coach Payton played for uh, Coach Peters, Chip Kelly, yeah, and Sean, and then Dennis Allen.
And and then back to Dennis.
Yep,
So, how did they differ in the building of teams? Because
yeah,
everyone has some things that you can learn from, and the whole goal of our podcast is to give little nuggets to add value to a company or to a family or to
yeah.
another team. So, kind of go through them. What do you think Sean brought to the team building thing?
I thought Sean probably did the best job of any coach of creating leadership at every level, and making sure that he was clearly communicating what his expectations were from everybody in their job. And his number one thing was know your role on the team. Not all roles are the same, but all roles are equally important. And I thought
Right.
the ability to even be able to hear tough news and tough things was hard, but you always knew where you stood and your job was clear. So I thought that was probably the best of his leadership style. When I got to the Philly, I played under Chip Kelly, and I loved his philosophy towards innovation and
Mm-hmm.
maximizing human potential. Like I was learning things about my body, how to rest, how to train. That was having a physical manifestation on the field, and I could
Yep.
see myself becoming a better athlete. But the teams that I was on didn't have captains, so we didn't have a
Mm.
clear kind of chain of command. We didn't really know exactly who to look to when things got hard, because we kind of had a rotating leadership style, and that was good at first, but over time, once you hit too many hurdles, it break down because you didn't have a core established. Then we
Mm-hmm.
switched to Doug Peterson, who's a player.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So he brought back that idea of like collaboration between coach and player, and I thought that was really good. Um, and we within a year took that same roster and won a Super Bowl with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought that the hard part was replicating that year after year with injuries and things like that. That became an issue of being too lopsided in the locker room, making sure that all your eggs aren't in one basket. So you had the
Right.
quarterback, Carson Wentz, that when he started to struggle, so much was staked on his success that it created an inability to address problems elsewhere on the team. And then Dennis Allen, I think, is another really smart, bright mind who inherited a culture. And I think his biggest challenge is how do you take this culture of a company that has had success and has done a lot of things, but is time to turn a new page? Do
Yeah.
you abandon the culture that everybody loves so much, but is in desperate need of an update, or do you make this your own? And I got to watch him do a bit of both. Really take parts of what was there in order to build upon it, whether it's core players, core principles, but also being able to usher this Saints team into a new phase where this is a new playing styles and new identity. It requires you to have a different relationship with him, and we see that team, consistently having success. So I've seen it, from a
Hmm.
multiple angles, and I think there's no right or wrong way to lead. I think there are effective leadership skills, and it's usually based on timing. And it's like the
Yep.
more I learn from each of these leaders, I see that okay, when I need to galvanize a team or I need to weather a storm, I'm looking at how Sean Payton delegates, things and empowers his players. If I'm looking at, how to challenge my team to grow on their own, I might look at how Chip Kelly talks about innovation and science and introduces these things
Hmm.
to the team. So each of them
Yep.
has their applications and depending on the situation.
Well, it's interesting. Most head coaches were assistant coaches,
Yeah.
and the effective assistant coach is the one that does exactly what you just articulated.
Hmm.
They take the things they learned that they felt
Hmm.
that were the most valuable from each of their experiences and then created their own signature.
Yep.
I think the ones that fail go try to emulate.
Hmm.
They go try to be exactly like
Yep.
whomever. You know what I mean? And that's so critical. And I think going in, we used to always say we wanted to build on vivid recall of past successes
Hmm.
because people had, when we got to Ohio State, we knew there were great successes. It wasn't as good as they wanted it at that moment, but we weren't going to say, well, everything's wrong with this place because it's not.
Right.
This place has had crazy, past successes. We're going to learn from our past mistakes. You know, we have to do that. If we ignore what was wrong before and don't improve upon that and not have those mistakes again, we're going to, and then we've got to become who we are.
Yep.
And, and I think building that team, what I've learned, I took over a Youngstown State program, an Ohio State program, and a university as a president.
Hmm.
And I felt I had to go in and hear and listen to the people and find out what was in their hearts, find out what they really thought we could build on, and also find out what this has been going on for a long time and this shouldn't be,
Yeah.
you know, those kinds of things. And it's really interesting hearing you talk about each of their strengths. And when you mentioned timing, to me, that is so true. I remember talking to a lot of my assistants that wanted to become a head coach, and I'd say, okay, well, look at the timing of what's going on there.
Right.
I was lucky when I came to Ohio State. They had good teams. They had a tough time, but they were kind of looking for an Ohio person
Yep.
because Coach Coop was awesome, but he wasn't from Ohio. And you know how people are sometimes.
Hmm.
They get a little bit, well, we need one of our own, type things.
Yeah.
And so it was perfect timing. And I took over 3 classes that didn't have much success and suffered, and they weren't leaving there without having success.
Right.
And so, I mean, they were just, that 2002 team, we weren't the best team in the country for sure at the beginning of the year, but they weren't going to not let us become the best team by the end.
Right.
And at the end, we were the best, and so timing is so critical. It's uh, I've had a chance to spend a lot of time with my former guys like Coach Fickle and Coach Freeman
Hmm.
and Coach Haycock, who was my defensive coordinator, not the one his brother, who was my defensive coordinator at Youngstown State, and he's at Iowa State, and some of my other guys who are head coaches at smaller levels. And it's really interesting to see all of them have a different moment they're in trying to build a team.
Yep.
It's so different and timing but one thing that's I think timeless, and that's listening to what the people are feeling.
Yeah.
Get their input. Find out what they need to know. And I'm sure the ones you were around in the NFL that did the best job of that, you know, were able to bring that team together.
Yeah, and I think this, to tie it all back together, I think this is why these are the type of things that I've learned from my mom. We talk about women being like some of the most dynamic leaders, is because that's one of the things it takes to be part of a family, right? Like mom asks everybody, "How are you feeling today?"
Right, right.
Takes the time to ask
Yeah,
and get to know, what's happening with the lives of the people in your family. And I think that small gesture is something that's important in leadership. Oftentimes we'll forget about those things, just asking people, "Hey, how was your day? What's going on,
right,
with your life?" And then understanding, how much that builds in trust, how much further that person might be willing to go from now for the team, just because
yeah,
they feel so much more invested. They have a place, and it's mutual. It's not this hierarchy where everybody is giving everything for the benefit of the guy at the top. It's not. It's a true
right,
community.
right. Well, it's like anything else. Dads sometimes are worried about the performance.
Right.
Mom's worried about the performer,
Exactly. Right.
right?
Yep.
And we used to always talk about that with our staff is that I know you're going to get all caught up watching the film
Hmm.
and, missed assignments or mistakes. And we do have to correct them.
Yep.
There's no doubt. I mean, that's part of our job. But we need to spend time with how's the performer doing,
Yep.
and our motto was always treat everybody like they're hurting, treat everyone like they have needs, treat everyone like you'd like to be treated, and if you can do that, you have a chance to build a team.
Yep.
And that's I did bring a couple other props. So I got my Super Bowl with your autograph on it
There you
that you
go.
gave me. How many people in the NFL have beat Brady and who does who was the other one you beat? Manning.
Manning. Yeah. Nobody.
Who else can? No, I was going to say,
Yeah.
is
Nobody.
there anyone else?
Nobody.
And the other prop I have is, and you have a copy of this, is your first round draft choice ball.
Oh yeah.
And I remember in '02, um, the Colts drafted Doss,
Yep.
and they sent me a ball like that. And I thought, man, that is pretty cool. I'd love to get a ball, but I didn't realize every team didn't do that.
Oh
And
yeah.
and so I thought, well, I can't afford to get a ball for every guy that gets drafted. We get, 7 guys drafted a year or
Right.
whatever.
Especially
I
DBs.
right,
Yeah.
right. So I said to back in '03, I said to the guys, if you're in the first round,
There you go.
I'm going to get you a ball, and I'm gonna put one in my office and keep one, for you.
Yep.
And I don't know if did we get one for the position coach, but anyway. Uh, and so I've got 88 balls up in my ceiling here, some of which are bowl games, some of which are this or that, so one of which is your Super Bowl ball.
Oh, I
But
appreciate that.
I've got those, I don't know, 17 first round picks or whatever it happens to be. And
Yeah.
one of these days, not when I'm 72, but maybe when I'm 82, I'm going to send you your extra ball
Yeah.
so you can give it to one of your kids or whatever.
Yeah. I
But
need
for now, I got to keep it. I just sent you your goal sheets and all that stuff, and
You did. I appreciated that. I was
and
I'm trying to figure out how to make a mini winner's manual for my kids,
right,
start them
yep.
up, and I'm like, yeah, and you had all the sheets and everything from a while back. That was kind of crazy.
Well, it's funny. I was going through my files and I thought, well, why should these sit in my basement? And so if I can find the guys, now you can find you, but some of the guys, who knows where they are and
Yeah.
so forth. But I've been working. I don't have them all back, but it's been funny seeing the responses of guys reading back to what they were like when they were 18 and 19,
Yeah,
and
it's
and
crazy. I was still talking
it's
about my habits. Like I was focused on trying to like work on film study
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
managing my time. Literally the same stuff I'm talking about now. It's crazy.
But what's funny, if the people on your team, and this is great for our viewers, if the people on your team know that you're trying to help them reach their own goals, and our goals weren't just about football,
Yeah.
they're about every phase of your life,
Yep.
then you're going to have a better chance to build a team.
Hmm.
They need to know you want them to rise up, just like a community or just like a country.
Yep.
If everyone knows that we want to help everyone reach their goals, we got a chance.
Yep.
It's so let me go to one other team. So the NFL Players Association,
Mhm.
and then you were on the NFL Coalition. What was it called?
The Players Coalition.
Players Coalition.
Yep.
So now we're talking about 32 teams. How do you build a team of the players first? That's one team.
Mhm.
But then, of course, there's the organizations. How do you get those two to work together? Tell us a little bit about the, and you did it at a time that was, there was some stuff going on.
Yeah.
I, give us your experience of trying to build that group into a team.
Yeah. So trying to figure out, back in this is 2017.
Mm-hmm.
You've got myself and a bunch of players who are really active with social issues,
Mm-hmm.
going from education all the way to police brutality, and are trying to figure out how to take their platforms and collectively use it to be the most impactful as possible. Just because we were frustrated with how the media would take maybe one guy's, comments and paint the whole picture. We understood that there was a need for collective action and a collective voice. And organizing is like the hardest thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
especially around,
Team building.
yeah, it's team building, right? Especially
Team
when
building.
there's no paychecks involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just matters of the heart. That I think becomes difficult. And what we ended up doing was creating the Players Coalition, which stands out of as a vehicle so athletes don't have to find themselves in that crossroad. And so what we did was organized as many professionals and experts that were willing to help us, so that we could be educated in what we were saying. We could use our platforms responsibly. We can educate guys who wanted to be active, because we felt like that was the number one thing. How do we make sure that our platform is going to be one of honesty, integrity, and truth?
Mm-hmm.
But we also wanted to figure out how do we collectively do this. And so we needed an organization, called ourselves the Players Coalition. We started with 12 players. And what we would do is, if I was doing some things in Philly, they would all, also post it or show up, and we lobby for different policies. We do public education campaigns. And what we started with, in doing that, we were able to show the league that we are one organized, that we have a plan, and that we're going to continue this work whether they support it or not. And through that show of organization, we're able to create an easy pathway for them to support us, in which they did. And then it also created an easier way for those behind us now, the athlete today who looks around and sees an issue in their community and wants to figure out, how do I have an impact beyond my own capabilities? They don't have to do all of that work with starting an organization and doing whatever. They can plug into the Players Coalition, get the information they need, get the support they need, and have a collective voice that's there to back them. And we've grown from 12 players in the NFL to over 12 professional sports leagues,
Hmm.
and gotten all the way down to the collegiate level and changed dozens of policies across the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, you brought up the point of what the media sees,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 also I always felt what the media doesn't see. They wanted to see some of the, they talk about some of the stuff, from their vantage point, but you know, some of the things that our guys were down in there in the trenches
Mm-hmm.
trying to be helpful with, they don't seem to talk about them. And I'm a football guy. I guess I never knew until I started reading a little bit more about you, really reading your book, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know the difference between the NFL Players Association and the Players Coalition.
Yeah.
And I just learned this very moment that the Players Coalition was outside of just football,
Mm-hmm.
because I was going to ask the question, well, is the Players Coalition still going on?
Yep.
Because, I mean, I didn't know that. So, what other sports have you partnered with? And are you still working with the Players Coalition?
Yeah, I was just with the Players Coalition maybe a couple months ago, helping out with some pieces of legislation to try to stop and reduce gun violence across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we partnered with. What we've been able to do is be a sister kind of organization, an umbrella group to other sports leagues that want to create their own. So, um, MLS started. I forget exactly what it was called. It's like the Black Players Coalition or something, but it's a group of soccer players who wanted to do the same thing. We helped them get organized, and they sit under us. And it's the same for the WNBA to women's soccer and a bunch of other
Mm-hmm.
professional sports. We sit
So
in.
is there an office somewhere? Is there a staff or anything?
Yeah, so we have our support stuff. We don't have an office.
Okay.
It's just a group that we have all the supports that
Right.
are we pull on resources from. The good thing about athletes, like we convene people, we do that really well.
Sure.
People
Sure.
come pay to see us
Yep.
do things. It's the
Right.
same ability outside of sports. So what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing is we tend to bring all of the resources to us. So when athletes want to do something, they want to start. They want to address educational gap in Columbus, Ohio. Then we can plug them in with all of the grassroots organizations in Columbus, Ohio, and plug them into things that are already, built that they can
Mm-hmm.
then
Right.
help, as opposed to the athlete trying to figure out how to be a great athlete and now also start an organization and have an impact. We take that grass work and that groundwork out of it. We support the organizations that are already doing it well, and we put the athlete and we figure out a way to allow the athlete to use their voices as they see fit to this cause of this organization, because that was the issue that we were finding. And we thought that, and we realized that, not just addressing the issues, but mainly like how do we continue to be something that can be of service. And what the coalition really is a service for athletes who want to be socially involved to do it in the most effective way possible, based off of kind of the experiences that we ourselves went through as we did it.
So one of the kind of ties into one of the thoughts I was thinking about before we got together here. So that transition from being an athlete to not,
Yeah,
you know, it's a transition. I don't care what anyone thinks.
it is.
Okay. And uh, from being a coach and then not, I mean, there's a transition. Uh, I guess I would have a two-part question. One is, what have you seen as being the key to now finding a different kind of team?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not on a, you're not assigned to a team. You
Yeah,
got to create your own team.
yeah,
So the transition to finding your next team, and has the Players Coalition helped serve transition for some of our guys as they've left the league?
yeah. So I'll start with the latter. No, the Players Coalition hasn't provided like transition specifically for that,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it has, in some cases, provided an outlet for purpose. Like my
Mm-hmm.
my co-founder Anquan Bolden, he retired from the NFL to do this work full time,
Mm-hmm.
and it has definitely provided that for him.
Mm-hmm.
But for guys like myself, maybe who are just transitioning, into this next phase, I think the biggest thing for me has been patience.
Mm-hmm.
It's because so much of our lives have been built for us. Like everything as simple as when you eat, when you go
Mm-hmm.
to meetings, where you go, your schedule, everything has been provided for you. And now as a player, I'm in a position where I got to create my own team. And it's like, well, okay, to create my team, then that means that people aren't telling me what to do. I got to tell them what to do. So I got to create the vision for the team. And you
Mm-hmm.
realize how meticulous it the process is and how much preparation goes into building teams. If you want to be intentional about it, you want to have a
Mm-hmm.
lasting team. And knowing what I know about what makes good teams and successful teams, I realize that takes patience. One,
Yep.
to develop myself in a position where I could even be accountable to that kind of team and be in a
Mm-hmm.
leadership position to that kind of team, but also understanding that those things are developed over time. Even when I find the people, there's things that we got to go through. There's a process that has to be in place in order for us to accomplish something, that is worthwhile, something that will last the test of time. And that's where I'm at. You start at the bottom of that totem pole again, and having been at the top of it. I played in National Football League for 13 years. nobody in the world would deny that I'm good at what I do. And now you have to transition into another phase where there's the doubts. Nobody's seen you do these things. There's the
Right.
self-doubt. You've got to be patient enough to get yourself back to that white belt mentality, to the mentality I had as a freshman at Ohio State, or the
Hmm.
kid who walked into the camp, who's willing to step in front of the line, willing to lose in front of everybody, willing to risk it, but is humble enough to learn from every experience. That's kind of where I find myself at now. And it's a hard place to be. It's a lonely place to be. But I've got, a lifetime of experiences so far to pull on to at least keep me, grounded in this moment.
You know, you were blessed early on in your life to have people show you how to be that guy that jumps to the front of the line and
Yeah.
all that. And then you had a great long career, and you were always a learner.
Yeah.
So you wanted to learn and listen, even if it didn't have to do with exactly what you were doing.
Yep.
A lot of the guys leaving the league, or let's take the military, same thing.
Yeah.
They're leaving the military. They've had all that structure. They've had the rush of being very important, and defending our world. Uh, and all of a sudden they're not there. I really think about how can we more effectively get groups like that onto healthy teams,
Yeah.
because and they themselves need that health. Um, and so I'm sure it's interesting as you think through the teammates you've had, who some of them are here and some of them are there. Um, and that's, I can't think of anything more important than being part of great teams, whether it's personal family teams or professional.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing too is and what I'm trying to do now is change the type of team I've been on, because I do think that it's a bit of a trap that we fall into, people like athletes, coaches, military, where the majority of our identity has been wrapped around what we can do.
Hmm.
And very little time is spent in asking the questions of like, who do I want to be, and how do I want to be. And so now we're in the situation, that's where I find myself, where nobody's here to tell you what you are going to do. And in fact, what you do with your time is not who you are. You want to, now I'm at a place where I want to make sure that what I do aligns with who I want to be. And I find a lot of people who aren't, I've been blessed to be in a situation where I can be patient and figure that out. A lot of people are not, and
Yeah.
are in situations where they put a whole lot of time and effort in one direction, only to do these things and not be the person that they want to be, where those two ideas are conflicting. And I think that's really at least the purpose of my life now, is how do I make sure that those two things stay in alignment, that my actions are always pushing me towards who I want to be, and then that is giving me a larger purpose than just my, I can take my jersey off and have a ground sound mind about who I am and where I'm going, because everything I'm doing is still moving on in that direction. I can fail, I can succeed, and none of them are really wavering, because I'm really just focused on who I am and at this real moment. I think those are the conversations
Hmm.
that are important. Those are the teams that I'm trying to find myself now, because it's a new language, right? There's not many people who are in that situation, and that requires you to find some new teammates sometimes.
If you remember, on our block O of life,
Hmm.
you know, the top three things were your purpose, and that was who you are.
Yep.
And it was hard to talk to young people who were just there to get to the league and be an all American and be all Big Ten. And then the bottom three things were your goals, and that was what you do.
Yep.
And having that discussion, and I had that discussion with my students when I was a president. I said, we've got to set goals as to who we are as people,
Hmm.
and that's our morals and our values and our spirituality and our personal family and our caring and giving for others. And of course, we'll set goals for what we do. I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be I'm going to, you know, do these things. I'm going to play sports, or I'm going to be in the theater. But that's, to me, the harder we worked on the who we are made us a better team.
Hmm.
It made us play the game of football better. It I believed it made us a better university trying to do, what we were doing.
Yep.
And that's the patience part. You brought up patience. That's the patience part. We're so transaction oriented,
Hmm.
and we're not deep enough with who we are. And that's one of the things that, why we wanted to start this podcast and talk about, hey, we don't know what any of your businesses are. We don't have any of your spreadsheets, but here's what we believe can be some ideas.
Yep.
We don't claim to have all the answers, but some ideas as to how do you build your team. Now I'm going to pull you into a crazy question here.
Okay.
NIL and transfer portal. How do you build teams? And I've had a lot of conversations with my coaching friends. You have to build so much faster because your roster turns over
Hmm.
fast. I mean, you might have 40 new guys.
Yeah.
Uh, so, from your vantage point, what might be a nuance uh, for that scenario in college football now that we don't have time to sit for 4 years with that goal sheet and talk about who we are, and
Yeah.
because it's in and out.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it requires a more dynamic, in my opinion, it requires a more dynamic leadership style that hasn't been a prerequisite in college football to this point, which is
Mm-hmm.
what made coaches like you special, right? Like there weren't 1,000 Jim Trussels out there. There was one, and it was you or one of the few people who ran a program like that. And it's why Ohio State's recruiting classes is always respected. Um, and what that required you to do is treat people with respect. Where we were there not because we feared you or because we had the most money. We were there because we believed in what you had to offer. We believed in this team goal. And I think that has been the transition that's been harder for these coaches in the college level. You have a lot of, coaches who are just my way or the highway. You've always had the leverage over a
Mm-hmm.
player to say, do what I want, or or I'm in
Mm-hmm.
control of your actions, where you go, and almost ultimately your career. And now without that control, we're finding it hard to suddenly create team building. And it's like in my mind is that I would argue is because there are not enough dynamic leaders in the space.
Mm-hmm.
In the NFL, it's the same thing. Guys are getting paid
Yeah.
a 30% turnover every year, but why does a coach like Mike Tomlin in his, over probably 13 year, maybe more, I'm probably shorting him a few
More.
years,
Yeah.
has never had a losing season, right?
Right.
With all of the same kind of visibility, his players have the same, distractions and abilities to do what they want, but he's had that continued success is because his standard is the standard, and the type of people they bring into that organization are motivated and moved by things that are bigger than the money or just their
Mm-hmm.
particular opportunity. If you have a vision for people that are bigger than them, they can commit to it. But if the vision, if you're pushing a selfish, vision where all we want you to do is come here as a player so that we can win, and you're not invested in me as the player becoming more than that, then it becomes very transactional, even for the
Yep.
player. And I think that's what the situation that you see. I think the dynamic leaders will have dynamic teams, and everyone else, it will be more transactional.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting, I think, next 5 to 10 years, because there's a lot of things still unanswered in this whole realm of things, and I'm very concerned that it's going to affect the other sports
Mm,
because they've been so used to spending all this money, and all of a sudden now finally they have to share it a
yeah.
little bit, which we should have done 50 years ago.
Yep.
uh, but when you spend so many years not doing it the way, you're going to end up in a tough spot. So
Mhm.
I'm very concerned about how it's going to affect the other sports and the other levels
Yeah.
of football,
But
and
but
it's
you
so
would think,
important.
yeah, and but I think it's going to be important that when those things happen, that we make sure that we view this from the right vantage point.
Yep.
Because I've heard so many arguments about, like you said, well, well, if we take this money and need to start paying players, then they might get rid of these other sports. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's only so that they can make the same profits that they've been making.
Yeah.
You get it? It's like,
Right. I
because
hear you.
even if you take away the big power schools, it's like you've got Division 2, Division 3, D4.
Yeah.
All of these schools have football
Yeah.
programs, and they are not paid for by the football team, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
there's other ways to have
Yeah.
other sports, but I think
Yeah.
you know we get so caught up in again the way things have been that
Yeah.
we can't even imagine a new way of doing things because they either don't equate to the same types of profit or don't equate to the same types of control. And I think
Mhm.
we're definitely in a place where we've swung to the other side of that spectrum. But I think we're in a phase where we're learning too, where okay, this
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be perfect now, but it transitions us to a more equitable relationship between players and universities. And I think those
Well,
growing pains get worth it.
and here's my big question that whenever I'm asked is, I want to know what is the, and whatever you want to call it, the intercollegiate athletics, NCAA, the Power Five,
Hmm.
whoever is making the decisions. I'd like to know what are their desired outcomes,
Yeah.
because they've been revenue based,
Hmm.
and now that revenue thing has been shattered.
Yeah.
They're still making lots of revenue, but where, and how, how much of it is the who, we are trying to sport. To me, the greatest value, even though you can make lots of money and very few people do, but everybody else can have great value out of being a part of sport and
Yep.
about a part of team of any kind.
Yep.
We had 9 engineering teams at Youngstown State, and I watched those guys working, gals working together. It was just like watching one of my teams
Hmm.
in the weight room, but they had wrenches.
Right.
I mean, uh, and the value they were getting. And so, my question to whoever it is going to be sitting in the room trying to figure out, okay, A, we better admit we've been greedy, and B, what's the solution?
Hmm.
Okay. What are their desired outcomes?
Yeah.
And if it's to continue on the profit margin the way that it's been, and we're going to drop sports, whoo, or, what is it that we're going to do? And stay tuned, I guess, because we could sit here and talk all afternoon,
Yeah.
you know, about what it is. But to me, and I guess I'll end with this, and I'm going to ask you for a final comment because I always get too long, and then they tell me no one wants to listen for that long. But anyway, we get to talking. But you know, uh, being a part of a team is just a microcosm of being part of a civilization,
Hmm.
and part of you're part of a, like we used to always say, hey, it's all about the team. It's about Ohio State, it's about the university, it's about the state, it's about the game of football, it's about the nation, it's about us being the right kind of people in the world. There's nothing more important than people having an opportunity to be a part of a healthy team, thinking about the right things, doing the right things. And what I hope is that the people that watch It's All About the Team get a little nugget or twinge or thought, or get challenged
Yep.
as to, how can my team, starting at home, and then the ones we're all in teams outside of home, uh, how can I help all of us have better teams? And so that's my goal. And in my old age is to, you know, I'm done making money. I'm done worrying about that. I'm just trying to add value. Um, but you get the closing thoughts
Yeah.
on, if you think about the phrase, it's all about the team,
Yeah.
sum it up for us.
Man, I think this is a great platform because the one thing I always struggled with was a new player who had only been on dysfunctional teams.
Mm,
And I knew it wasn't really, all their fault. They just
no,
didn't know
that's all they
how,
knew.
accountability works, how, the ability to drop your ego so that we can get better in this environment, the need for transparency and trust. the need for just mutual respect, the need to understand, timing and who you're talking to, when you're talking to them. When somebody doesn't even have that and they come on to good teams, it can be tough, right? They can either not fit in because they just weren't equipped with the right tools, or they can poison a team and poison a good team because you brought somebody in who doesn't understand it. And I think getting people as much access as possible. I've seen people who know they're not on good teams, but have nowhere else really to get any other information from.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we can have conversations like these to talk about, the makeups, not about winning and losing, but about
No.
just the fabric of what makes teams, allows us to see how means to like bring huge ideas together, because I'm a huge believer that anything worth doing is probably going to be bigger than what you can do with your own hands.
Yeah.
So in order to leave any any kind of mark on this life, on this world, is going to require a team, even if it's just a one-on-one relationship, if it's you and a partner, or if you and a group, it's you and a family. It's always going to be bigger than just you. And so these are universal skills, ones that I've been and you've been trained in since forever, just being around this game. And so it's I love being able to offer that to people who I know maybe haven't gotten exposed to this, either they didn't play sports or just didn't come from good teams. To know that there are better ways out here, I think is an important message to carry forward.
Well, and as you said, at one point we were talking about something, and you said, well, all people saw was what the media said about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
right now, let's face it, the media, and let's not blame the media, but society, let's say,
Yeah.
is bombards us with how we should think about what I need.
Yep.
And we don't get bombarded with what does everyone else need.
Mm-hmm.
And now, granted, we're all selfish humans because that's what we are. But how hard do we work on being a good part of the whole?
Yeah.
And that's you don't want. I wanted you guys to have personal goals
Mm-hmm.
and of what you do, but more important were the personal goals of who you are and how you fit in with the rest of the world. And so that's the fun of talking about this. And like I told you when I texted you about 3 weeks ago, I said, look, now I can't have an It's All About the Team podcast without having the consummate team guy. So,
Well, I appreciate you having me.
It's been a blessing. And I always brag about Malcolm Jenkins and Michael Jenkins, my Jenkins twins,
Yeah.
because Michael made the catch, and he's a special guy. And you probably hit him a few times because he was in that league a lot. He was in that line. But, I was so blessed to have so many great young men that taught me a lot. And hopefully I shared something with them. But that's what a team is. Yeah. You learn from each other. And I know our viewers learned from you today.
Well, I appreciate you. I've learned obviously so much from you and tried to build on that, compound on it, and share it. So I appreciate you allowing me to step on your platform.
Well, and you know what? You can do things I can't do, and that's what makes me so proud.
There it is.
So you keep at it. God bless you, my man, and we'll stay in touch. And to all of the viewers out there, never forget, it's all about the team. Till next time, have a great one.